We are live! And it's Empire State of Baseball on this Tuesday, September the 5th, 2023, airing on Twitch, Twitter, X, YouTube, and powered by StreamYard. Alrighty, folks. We are saying goodbye to summer, and even though it's hard to do it on a day like this because it was like 95 degrees out, tomorrow is going to be a high of, I think, 97 tomorrow in the New York, New Jersey area, but we are going to be eventually saying goodbye to summer, which has been a long summer for New York baseball fans, and saying hello to fall. We have turned the calendar. It is now September. Happy September, Joe. How are you today?
I am well. Football is slowly approaching, and baseball is relegated to a lot of wow, these guys have potential for 2 or 3 years. So I'm good. We had an absolutely gorgeous weekend this weekend. I mean, this was the best Labor Day weather I can remember in years. So that was a great weekend.
Corey, how'd you spend your Labor Day weekend?
Oh, a lot of running around this weekend. Spent half of it actually with our co-host Joe up at his house in Pennsylvania. Very fun weekend by the lake. And then actually spent the tail end of it in Belmar with my girlfriend and her friends and family. So a lot of running around, and I finally came home at about 7:30 a.m. this morning. So felt good to get back.
So you're at Belmar for Labor Day weekend, where you're doing the pumping of fist and the throwing of napkins at certain bars down by the shore.
Listen, let me tell you, I was not pumping fists at DJs, and I was actually in bed by around 11 o'clock last night. So it wouldn't have lasted too long at DJs. But like Joe said, phenomenal weather, and it's crazy that we're past Labor Day now, because summer, in my opinion, is definitely my favorite season. Fall's a close second, but summer is without a doubt my number one. So upsetting to see it go. Glad we're closer to the end of this baseball season because it sucks for all of us, and happy to get to some football.
Thomas, first LDW as a dad, how was it?
That is accurate. Yeah, it was hot. We didn't do too much. We had a birthday party on Saturday. The rest of the weekend was pretty low key. But definitely looking forward to the fall. Like a little bit of the cooler weather. I think people know I love me some pumpkin spice, pumpkin everything. I had pumpkin pancakes on Sunday. They were delightful.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, they're the best. With a little bit of like brown sugar butter with them. It's unbeatable.
Tom is the guy who decorates his house with Christmas decorations before Thanksgiving.
That is not true. I actually have a hard and fast rule that we do not do that.
You can't break out the pumpkin spice before Labor Day is up.
Pumpkin spice is delicious. It's basically just cinnamon, and it's amazing. So.
And I will say, Joe, you'll respect this too, because when I went to the bar last night for dinner, I asked what the seasonal was, and it was Oktoberfest. And don't get me wrong, Sam Adams, of all the Sam Adams, the Oktoberfest is my favorite seasonal, but I refused to get it. I went with the separate beer because it's not time just yet. Now it's fair game.
Oh, now it's fair game. Football's
on. Oktoberfest is kind of meh anyway, but it has to be cold. It has to be cold to drink that.
We move forward. November 1st, we're playing Christmas music. We get these seasons moving along. But if I wish I could have a DeLorean that can fast forward us to 2024 and beyond, because after this past weekend and after certain call-ups that we're going to get into in a little bit, a lot of excitement happening in New York baseball in terms of future. Not immediate future, but future. We'll get into it, though, in our segments on tonight's lineup card, which we'll start off with the Queen's Gambit, the latest on the New York Mets. Ronnie Mauricio came up on Friday. Already had like one of the fastest hit balls off the bat. Joe, I think that was like, 116 or something like that? It was insane.
17.2 or 3.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Third hardest hit ball of the year, I believe, for the Mets. And the only one that wasn't Pete Alonso, I believe. So and he's had a couple over 110 already. So
good stuff, and looking forward to talking about Mauricio and the kids. They had the 4 kids in the lineup today, so we'll talk more about that later. The Fantasy Hot Corner, Jonathan Hernandez back for the final installment of the Fantasy Hot Corner for the 2023 season. This is how fast time is flying by. A lot of fantasy leagues are winding down, so he's got one of the last spotlights to cover later on tonight. Then we got the Bronx burning, so we're going to get into the Yankees, and obviously with Mauricio being called up for the Mets, the Yankees did the same with Austin Wells and Jason Dominguez on Friday, charged the Yankees to a sweep over the Houston Astros, first full sweep of the Astros since 2013. We'll get more into that later on. And then Guess the Graph is back, and I have tonight's autograph. So that will be a lot of fun as always. And here we go now, the Queen's Gambit start things off. So let's talk New York Mets baseball. And for the New York Mets, they're at Washington for 2 games. Yeah. They have an off day. They finish off the week at Minnesota. So, Minnesota, obviously a team that's going to be probably the AL Central's best come playoff time. The Nationals been kind of up and down this season. So, but we're not looking forward to the schedule. We're looking forward to the progression of Ronnie Mauricio and the continuation of the kids. Does the media now have a nickname on the 4 there? They call them the Fantastic Four, the Fearsome Foursome. What's the deal there, Joe?
I don't know. I've seen everything from baby Mets to the kids, and
boring.
The baby Mets is a bit derivative of what the baby Bombers was. So, I don't know what they're going to call them yet. Listen, at the end of the day, these kids are still proving themselves. I think the only person who has secured their job for the long-term future is Francisco Alvarez, and even he's been mired in a very bad slump. But the potential is there, plus the fact that he's 20 years old, whereas Beatty has some question marks with him. Mauricio has some plate discipline question marks with him. Vientos has question marks whether or not he can stay at the big league level. And these things are supposed to be getting answered in front of our eyes, but at the particular moment, before we jump to nicknames and sticking around and, all these kids sticking around, eventually, we have to see it on the field, and we have to say, okay, I feel good penciling somebody else besides just Alvarez in to my starting day lineup come April 1st of next year.
Yeah, and right now, Ronnie Mauricio really is making a case to be that starting second baseman next year. I did want to see him play a little bit of left field, maybe a little bit of third base, especially down the stretch here. Go another week or two and the Mets are pretty much mathematically eliminated at that point. Then you can start to fool around with it. I don't think they'll do it just yet. But in terms of these baby Mets, as I've seen, that's the one I've probably seen the most on Twitter, the baby Mets. It's exciting to see. And for Mauricio to come up, because we've been saying it since spring training, nobody expected him going into spring training. Nobody expected this kid to make the big league club out of spring. And the fact that we had to have that conversation just goes to show how good of a spring training he had. I mean, he was the Mets' best hitter in spring training this year, was one of the spring training leaders across baseball for most of spring training. And then he went into the minor leagues, picked up right where he left off. And again, most fans had no issues with him sitting down there for a couple of months to continue to work and polish himself as a player. But when this season really started to go into the crapper and the Mets just could not put anything together, and you're seeing a kid in AAA hitting over 300, hitting home runs. Granted, he plateaued a little bit, I think, in July before waking up more recently. It's great to see him come up and just pick up right where he left off with this club in spring training. I mean, look at his numbers. And again, it's a very small sample size. I mean, we're talking about one weekend here, but he already has 5 hits and 11 at-bats, a couple of extra base hits. You mentioned it before, 117 miles per hour. I mean, talk about a hard-hit ball. It doesn't get harder than that. So really encouraging sign. I hope to see him continue this down the stretch and make a case where you could go in there. You're like, you know what? Maybe this guy is our second baseman next year. McNeil, we know, can play the outfield. I actually do like him in the corner outfield spots. I think he's pretty good out there for the most part. So you have a case where you have a super utility starter in McNeil. You could basically plug him anywhere. Mauricio get the majority of your playing time at second base, you figure, and you see what it goes. But that's really what's left for the Mets this season, and the Yankees too. More to come on that a little later. See what these kids have. See if you have pieces of your 2024 team in place now. See what they could do, and then I'll just help you when you go to assess the future come this offseason.
Yeah, no, we're looking forward to it. The Mauricio, you mentioned the 5 of 11 start for the weekend for Mauricio. Obviously follows a AAA stint where he hit 292, 23 homers, 71 RBIs, and that is hard to ignore. I know we've talked on the show many times when Mauricio was on the knocking on the door of a call-up. It was more of figure out where he would fit in the field. Thus far, I think we've seen Mauricio play second and a bit of third over this weekend. I know there's talks of putting him in the outfield as well. I guess that speaks to the value of Mauricio to try to test him in these different positions and see where you have it. I think with the Mets, you have guys that could give you that flexibility. Jeff McNeil, of course, very flexible as well. You can move to third base, left field. So you kind of figure out over this next month where a guy like Mauricio's comfort zone is going to be. And it's just good times for the New York Mets. What do you think, Tom?
I think where like Mauricio specifically, I mean, seeing him hit, that ball on Friday night was crazy. But I think you need to find him like a position for 2024. I don't think you can have him moving around. I think that's a lot for a young player to really have to learn. And I know this year at this point is just experimenting, and that's a good thing for him to be doing. But I think you need to really do some deep dives and figure out, where do you see him? Is he your left fielder in 20? If he's going to be part of the plan, is he your left fielder? Is he your second baseman? Is he your third baseman? And then if that's the case, where do the rest of those dominoes fall? McNeil, you said does have some flexibility. He could play those other positions. Beatty and Vientos, it seems like they're third baseman. So if that doesn't work out for them, if that's where Mauricio is most comfortable, what does it mean for them? We haven't really gotten into the whole Alonso situation and those floating around. And if he's truly going to be moved, then I guess that does kind of could solve part of the issue. I guess McNeil or someone could play first, and then you move part of that, but you're moving such a important piece. I don't think they should move. A lot of questions. I feel like it almost is like this similar situation to what Yankee fans have been talking about for years, with the Yankees kind of like log jam and like there's too many guys that play the position and things aren't fitting. Mets are going to have make some tough decisions this offseason, and it's going to be interesting to see how they figure out this puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, the Mets have a gluttony of infielders. Vientos and Beatty both play third base. Vientos can play a little bit of first base, which alleviates that problem, and is more of a DH profile. But between Mauricio, McNeil, Acuna in the minors, the Mets have a lot of options for second base and third base. They have a shortstop that's locked in for the next 10 plus years. So the Mets are going to have to make somebody's eventually going to be the odd man out, and especially with Gilbert and Clifford, who are outfielders in the minor leagues. Somebody's going to be the odd man out on the team, whether that's McNeil, McNeil's advantage that the young kids don't have is McNeil can play 5 positions or 4 positions. And that's something that's extremely valuable. Even if he's not in an every single day role, he can move around. He can go anywhere you need. And if anybody needs a break, he can go there. The other kids, we don't know if they have that capability yet. So I'm first and foremost, we got to see if the bats stay. Second of all, then we find a place for them. If one of them has to be an odd man out in a trade, so be it. But let them prove that they belong at the major league level, and let them prove that this will be a problem, not that what we think it will be. Make them prove that. Make them say, okay, we have too many guys who we know can play. We have too many guys who can be on this team, and somebody's going to be the odd man out, and then you can flip them for another asset. But at this particular moment, I need to see more from Beatty and Vientos. Vientos just had a triple today. Yep. It's great. I want to see both of them starting to hit towards this end of the season, and that way I can feel better about going into next year and not wanting to go out and get a veteran third baseman.
Yep. Exactly.
Of course, and I'm actually glad you. Yeah. Sorry,
I was going to say too, you're touching real quick on the third baseman. I mean, I really hope to see Beatty wake up here down the stretch too, because that's the player of the 4 kids. Beatty is the one that's really been the most disappointing this year, because he was the first to come up this season. I mean, him and Alvarez came up pretty much right away back in April. But Beatty was really supposed to be the guy this year. He also had a very nice spring training. And very nice AAA numbers too while he was down there, and just did not translate to the major league level. I think a big part of the Mets' first half struggles, I don't want to put it all on Brett Beatty, because that's definitely not fair, but he was expected to be a pretty consistent, you would hope, a consistent force in the bottom half of that lineup, and he just did not produce at the major league level this year. I mean, hopefully he can get a little more, but I'm a little concerned with Brett Baty. I still want to pencil him in as the third baseman next year. But if you go down the stretch here in the last month and he continues to go out there, and let's say he hits 150 over the course of September, I really have to start to question. It's like, well, could you really trust that? If you want this team to turn around and compete for a wild card spot next season, can you trust a guy hitting at the Mendoza line to be your third baseman? It's way too early to give up on him, I think. But when you want to win, you're a team that wants to win now, maybe not much now after the trade deadline. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Baty, because I do think he's still part of this future, but I am a bit concerned with him and his struggles.
And that's decision-making that's going to be up to Billy Eppler, as we've seen in the baseball tabloids, so to speak. Could be David Stern's decision as well. And now I had a general question, because I know we mentioned Stern's name, and so have many baseball pundits. But I'm going to just ask a very simple, generic question to Joe and Corey. Why David Stearns? Why is he the only one?
Exact same question on our Twitter to no response from Joe.
So I do want to kind of get a more general response to this, but why is David Stearns looked at as the guy, Joe?
So 2 reasons. One, because the development that he's done with some of these young Brewers players. I mean, the Brewers have been in it basically for the last decade. They've been in it with a suppressed budget versus the big teams. He is seen as somebody who can develop talent and find talent in places that a lot of other players have overlooked. He obviously, injuries notwithstanding, which happen with pitchers, he has built a team that has an unbelievable depth of pitching talent. And I think that's highly, highly valued. He's young, and not for nothing, Met fans really seem attached to him because he grew up as a Met fan. He grew up, I think he's either from Queens or Long Island, and loves the Mets. So I think there's that. There's also a relationship with Billy Eppler. They're apparently close friends as well. So it just seems
why would a relationship with Eppler matter unless Eppler is going to be kept on?
Eppler would probably be kept as his GM, and he would be the president of baseball ops.
I would be the president of baseball ops.
Yeah, and I would say one thing maybe too on the Eppler point. I mean, maybe part of the reason why they brought a guy like Eppler in last offseason was knowing that connection was there and not trying to bring in a guy for 1 year, one and done. So trying to have a guy, because listen, when you bring in a president of baseball operations, at the end of the day, that's that person's team. It's the player ops president's team. They're the one who set the strategy, set the vision. The GM is just the one going out there and signing the contracts essentially and getting things done day to day. But it's the president of baseball operations team. So it would be David Stern's team. Eppler kind of just doing his work, Stern's work, that is. But going back on Stern's point too, and why the Mets want to bring him in, I think right now what the Mets really desperately need is a little bit of stability in that front office. Because you look at what's been going on with the Mets for the last 4 years, going back to the last 2 years or so under the Wilpon regime, and you bring in Brody Van Wagenen, and that caused a big stir, some controversial moves from his side. Then Steve Cohen buys the team. Sandy Alderson's the temporary president. You bring in Porter and Scott, and what happens? Both of those. Porter didn't make it to day one of the season because of all of the allegations. Scott got a DUI halfway through the year. So right off the rip, you get to the end of the season and you lose 2 guys that you just brought in. Sandy Alderson couldn't wait to retire. He was forced to linger longer than he wanted to. Now you're bringing in Billy Eppler. So the Mets desperately need a little bit of stability, and they do want a culture change. And again, I don't know Stearns personally, but looking at his resume, he's young, data-driven, and that's the big thing in today's game, is being data-driven analytics. And whether you like it or not, that's the direction that a lot of major league clubs want to go to now.
Here's what I don't get about it though. So yes, he took over as the Brewers GM and then eventually made the president of baseball ops. Yeah, so he started. September 2015 is when he got in there. So the Brewers were bad then. That's not his fault. From 2018 to 2020, they made the playoffs every year, but 2 of those years they lost in the wild card, which I don't consider making the playoffs because I don't know. That's just how, and I've said that on the show previously. 2021, they lost in the DS. 2018, they did get to Game 7 of the NLCS and lost, and they didn't make the playoffs last year. So to me, it seems like what I've seen a lot of Mets Twitter and Mets fans is like this dying, like David Stearns is like, I feel like Mets fans talk about David Stearns the way I think they would talk about Theo Epstein, which I know I brought up before on the show. Like Theo Epstein would be like, oh my God, we went and got out like the greatest GM we could. And I just don't see that from Stearns. The other thing I know, Joe, you were saying about the development, what the Brewers have done really well in the last decade, right, is develop pitching, which has been one of the Mets' greatest strong suits, not just in the past decade, but in their history. They never have had a problem developing pitching. You know, if you go back in history, but obviously more recently with DeGrom and Syndergaard and those guys, like, even some of them, maybe Syndergaard now falling off, but like a lot of that happened after he left the Mets. Wheeler, more guys. I just don't see if that's like what you're saying his strength is like that kind of development, because their Brewers offense has been horrible for a long time, and that's also the Mets' current problem. I just don't see how it's a great fit, frankly.
I mean, the problem with the Brewers is look at the teams they lost to in the playoffs. I mean,
but they're also in a horrible division, and they're not dominating it.
Well,
they're not putting the foot on the throat of that trash division. That division's been bad. If it wasn't for the AL Central, they'd be the worst division in baseball for the last decade.
Yeah, yes, but recently the Cubs were great up until 2018, 2019. Then they started to fall apart due to free agency. The Cardinals are there every single year.
When have the Cardinals been like a real relevant team though recently?
This is like the first year they're going to miss the playoffs.
But a threat like that, you're like, oh, the Cardinals are going to make a run.
Cardinals
it's been a while.
Cardinals are always a threat. They always are. And at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, even if you get out of the Central, 9 times out of 10, you got to play the Dodgers or the Phillies or the Braves. I mean,
the worst division.
I know it's not.
Yeah, but it's the worst division. So like beat up on them. Like if you're, I guess I don't see it. I don't see him as like this messiah, which I feel like Mets fans talk about him like he truly is that. The Cardinals, they've lost in the wild card the last 3 years. So again, don't count that as making the playoffs. Then they got swept in the NLCS in 2019. And before that, they hadn't made the playoffs since 2015. Like the Cardinals, yeah, they've been good. They've been in this bad division and kind of beating up on bad teams, but they haven't been anything. They haven't really been relevant. They've got to the NLCS a decade ago. Other than getting swept in 2019. So it's like, I don't know. I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed by him.
Two things. From the Mets' perspective, you got to remember, Sandy Alderson's basically had the run of the team up until recently for over basically a decade, since I think it was 2011, 2012.
2011.
The Mets are looking for somebody who's going to come in. Stearns is 38 years old. Stearns is going to come in. Cohen wants the guy to be there 10, 15 years. And the Mets have had an old way of thinking for a long time. They want to come in, they want to revamp it, they want to bring in a guy who's going to revamp this front office, who's going to put his vision around the team. I get it, but you know what? The Brewers are, at the end of the day, a mid-market team, and they've built sustainable success basically since Stearns has gotten there.
They're in a division of other than the Cubs of mid-market teams, and they're not like
assets with less assets than anybody else. They don't have as much money as the Cubs do. They don't have as much money as the Cardinals do. This is Milwaukee. So if you look at their record, 2017,
St. Louis. I think we're kind of like we're kind of splitting hairs there. St. Louis has a pedigree of a franchise. But talking about like market wise, I don't think there's a huge difference between
St. Louis is one of the great baseball towns in the country. They're not a large market, but they're a small big market. And they've always acted that way. They're always in the top 5, 6 in payroll. The Brewers are never at that. The Brewers are a bottom 10 team in payroll most of the time. But, look at what they've done since 2017, 86 wins, 96 wins, 89 wins, skipping 2020 because who the hell knows, 95 wins, 86 wins. They're on their way to win another 85 plus win season this year. And yeah, you know what? It sucks They lost in the wild card rounds, but they also lost an NLCS to the Dodgers in Game 7. I mean, that's not a
that's the one year that you would really, I don't think you could like hang your hat on. That was good.
They lost to the Braves in 2021 in the NLDS. They're not losing to bad teams. They're losing to powerhouses and with a fraction of the payroll. I think that's what the appeal of Stearns is. He's built sustainable success. Whether you wanted, we can go back and forth, but they operate very much more similar to the Oakland A's than they do to a big market team. And he's built sustainable success and put the Brewers in a position where they're at least in the conversation.
I don't think he's like unqualified or a quote unquote bad hire. I just think the talk that I see about him, it's as if like the Yankees is as if the Mets are bringing in Theo Epstein. That's what it sounds like.
I'm also looking at
all this excitement for okay, maybe like this guy has it, but I don't think he's proven that in any way.
Two of the biggest trades he's made here with Milwaukee. The Christian Yelich deal, of course. Now you can go back and forth on if the extension was smart. Obviously, Yelich has had a resurgence of a season, but the last couple of years has been irrelevant. But that trade for Yelich, basically stole Yelich from the Marlins. But then you look at the Josh Hader deal as a failure. The Hader deal was not a good deal.
Which team hasn't stolen talent from the Marlins?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. You say the Hader. First of all, Hader was awful at the end of last year.
The Marlins won the Stanton deal. I'll say that.
Second of all, San Diego is not touching the playoffs with Hader on their, or at least this year on their team. So, can you really blame it? And he knew he wasn't going to re-sign him, and he had Williams next to him. So, listen, yes, it derailed the clubhouse. It probably screwed things up at the end of last year. I completely agree with that. But to say it was some awful, horrific trade that destroyed a franchise, it really hasn't. They are in first place. They are going to make the playoffs this year. So I think the theory is very similar to what the theory is in Billy Beane. And has Billy Beane ever won a World Series? Has he ever? I don't even know if he's been to the World Series.
But I mean, the financial situation between the Brewers and the A's is not similar. It's
more similar than you think. It's not like the A's aren't destitute, but I think the idea is if we take a guy who's had financial restrictions on him his whole career and built a moderately successful and has a winning record over the past decade, and we take that guy and apply him to a major league club with much more assets at his disposal, that is going to lead to more success. I think that's the basic premise of it. And in Stearns' case, I think that is a fair assessment when you look at the Brewers, since basically he's gotten there. They've been in the conversation every single year for the playoffs and the division.
Yeah. And one last point too.
And actually looking, and Joe is right on that. Me and Corey just keeps crossing hairs today, but Brewers A's are actually not too far away in payroll here. For the Brewers, they're in 20th with a $1.5 billion. Oakland A's 26th at 1.31. So they're actually not too far apart there. But Corey, wrap this point up, and then we're gonna go to the next bit. What do you got?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I mean, with David Stearns, one of the big things I've seen on Twitter, and I was actually talking about with Joe over the weekend, too, was with Josh Hader. I know Josh Hader becoming a free agent this year. Could the Mets go out and get Josh Hader to add to that bullpen, which has been pretty terrible this year, outside of Robertson's nice run in the first half? But talking with Joe, some great points here, too. I mean, if you're Josh Hader, unless the Mets are going out there and giving you significantly more money than any other team, I mean, why would you want to do that, too? I mean, you want to be a closer. You finally left the Brewers where they couldn't wait to give it to Williams the ninth inning. I mean, Hader has a chance here. He's still relatively young. Looking at the numbers he has, 160 saves in his career. This season, especially 1.13 ERA. I mean, you have a chance to really do something special in your career as a closer. So unless the Mets plan on moving on from Edwin Diaz, which they will not do, and especially it makes zero sense now to even think about doing a trade with Diaz because he's got a lot of money coming off an injured season. So from a Hader standpoint, I would love it. I just can't see how he would want it.
Yeah, I've been seeing this rolling around on Twitter, Met fans acting like they're going to sign Hader and build a super bullpen. You know, that only works when you're bringing a guy who's a borderline, who's not really going to be a top end closer. If you have a shot to compete for the saves record or at least be in that conversation of top 5 in saves all the time, which Hader does, to be honest, at his young age, why would you go to a place to be second fiddle to another closer? If the money is anywhere close, Hader's not coming here. That doesn't work with this. When you're talking top 2-3 closers at the position, that doesn't work. If you're talking a top 10 closer, maybe somebody who's a little further down the line, somebody who's got a different repertoire. You know, it worked with Britton and Chapman a little bit. I think Britton was towards the back end of his closing career. It did work for the Yankees, but by no means is a free agent going to sign with you to play second fiddle in the bullpen. I don't see Hader at all.
Speaking of money, Rich, what's this $1.5 billion and $1.31 billion
valuation?
Value. Okay, well, that's
valuation.
What's the payroll numbers? Can you look up the payroll numbers?
I've been looking at them. The Brewers this year estimated payroll is 125. Last year was 137. 103 before that, 97 before that, 134 before that, 107. So constantly over 100.
If I said payroll, I misspoke. My bad.
I was gonna say, yeah. The A's $59 million this year, 50 last year, 87 before that, 101 before that, 94 before that, and 76 before that. So I know those numbers seem close, but they're probably 30-40% different. So I don't think that's playing in the same, like the contract that Ryan Braun got would never fly in Oakland.
Well, more on David Stearns as we get into the offseason. I'm sure he is going to be a topic of discussion, no doubt about it. So we'll get more to David Stearns later on. But we do have to move along to the Fantasy Hot Corner. Before we get there, Tom, tell us all about Twitch.
Tell us about Twitch. So hopefully you are watching us live on Twitch right now. If you are, thank you. We definitely do appreciate that. If you would like to, if you're watching us on the replay and you want to watch us live, the best way to do that is on Twitch. Make sure you subscribe to Empire State of Baseball. You can find the link for that in our link tree on both of our Instagram and our Twitter bios. And again, it's the best way to interact live with the show, get your comments read out, just get involved. So download Twitch and give us a follow.
And I love that notification. You download the app, you subscribe to us, you get that notification at the top of your screen, you hit that, and you're in the show. And that's the easiest way to get in to our live stream here. All righty, let's move on to the Fantasy Hot Corner without any further delay. Here is Jonathan Hernandez with the final installment. I can't believe it. The final installment of the Fantasy Hot Corner.
What's going on, ESB crew? I'm back for what looks like might be my last Fantasy Hot Corner of the year. Thank you guys as always. It's been a fun year. It's been up and down with the picks, but it's been fun, you know. For the fantasy spotlight this week, I'm going with another Cub. I feel like I've picked a lot of Cubs. I don't know if that's true, but I'm going with Justin Steele. Justin Steele's been absolutely phenomenal this year. He's in the Cy Young conversation, and who says you need to throw hard in MLB these days to have success? He tops out at 92 to 93 at most. He's got a sub-3 ERA. He doesn't strike a lot of people out, but he keeps the ball in the ballpark, and he's been absolutely phenomenal. Personally, I'm upset. I wanted to pick him up this year before the season started, and I missed out. So if you have him, you're a very, very, very happy fantasy owner.
Yeah, Justin Steele, probably the best pitcher in the National League Central in terms of this season, probably just overall. Corey Faz, what do you got on Justin Steele?
Listen, he's having a phenomenal year. And when his name was mentioned earlier, going back to like late May, early June, you hear Justin Steele like, all right, you know, he's having a nice first half of the season. How many times have we seen that where a player is having a nice 2-3 months to start a year and then completely tail off and regress back to the norm? But Justin Steele not doing that this year. And I do have him in one of my fantasy leagues, and he's been a very fine pickup. So I do like to call out.
Yeah, I think he's right there in the conversation with Blake Snell at the moment for Cy Young Award in the NL. Those two seem to be the only ones that haven't fallen off this year. Spencer Strider's been up and down. Zach Allen's kind of fallen off a little bit, and he was my pick. But Steele has been a model of consistency, and what's even more impressive is Steele doesn't walk anybody. He's got the lowest walk rate in the NL, way, way ahead of Blake Snell. So It's going to be interesting to see if one of them falters down the stretch. The other one might get away with the Cy Young, but both have been deserving all year. And that's hard for me to admit because I don't like Blake Snell very much. But it's nice to see some guy that was not on the radar put together a great season like this.
It's definitely cool to see a guy come out of nowhere, and he doesn't seem like a guy who has the stuff that is, maybe going to be a stalwart in, like NL Cy Young voting moving forward. So kind of cool to see a guy that's like really peak, possibly win a Cy Young, and like maybe you never hear from him again. But those are those kind of cool years to look back on of like, oh yeah, that year that I don't even forget his name now, Justin Steele, Jason Steele, whatever, Justin Steele. Wins a Cy Young. Cool stories.
Very professional there, Thomas. And I said last week,
he's not on my fantasy team, NL,
and which, yeah, right. So when we were talking about on the triple play last week, which team might find themselves out of the playoff picture, I did mention the Chicago Cubs. Reason being is their pitching. It's not Justin Steele. It's everybody after Justin Steele. I mean, they've gotten some good innings out of Javier Assad, but it could be Jason Steele, but it's Justin Steele. I confirmed that. I asked him. Kyle Hendricks, Jameson Taillon, can't really trust those guys. I mean, they're on the older side. Maybe trust Hendricks a little more, but Taillon is like one of the worst pitchers in the National League this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Cubs finish up, but Justin Steele ain't a problem. John's wrapping this up with his second part of the corner. Let's take it away, John.
And from the spotlight, let's go right into the last pickup. I really don't have a pickup this week. I really just have advice. Justin Steele is a prime example of somebody that you can just pick up off the waiver wire and you never know what they're going to give you, right? My advice is that if you are in the playoffs in the next couple of weeks, do not be scared to drop the name or the person that's on your team that may be struggling or you feel that you need to drop to pick up somebody who's hot, whether it be a Dominguez, a prospect, Mauricio, somebody of that ilk, or somebody that just gets hot over the next couple of weeks. Don't be scared to drop that struggling player. Don't be scared to drop the struggling reliever, the starter, whatever the position is. Make sure that you fill your team and you do what you need to do to secure that you win your league. And that's really all I got, guys. Great season as always. Best of luck to everybody in your fantasy playoffs.
We're fully moving into streaming season of pitchers. I know, especially in in points leagues. I'm like looking at my one team who does have a nice buy right now, so we're taking a rest right now. But yeah, like basically everyone is on the chopping block to get dropped. As we go through these.
Yeah, I picked up Zach Geloff from the A's, and he's been absolutely tearing the cover off the ball. I dropped a prominent guy. I think I dropped Jose Abreu, even though he was having a down year. He was having a good few weeks, but I dropped him. I was like, you know what, this kid on the A's, second baseman Ozzie Albies got hurt, and I haven't dropped him. He's been keeping it up, and you know what? If he gets you points, that's what counts.
Yep, and I picked up Patrick Corbin today versus the Mets, and the Mets are winning 9-1. So that was a good pickup.
That's the scary thing with streamers. It's
never know.
Terrible. Like Patrick Corbin could actually knock you out of the playoffs because you picked him up hoping to get like 10 points, and then all of a sudden he loses you 17.
Yeah, but I will say while we're on pitching pickups, one guy that did stick with us for a little while. How about JP France? Because this is another guy never heard of before. Scooped him up back in like the very start of May, thinking maybe he gets a couple of starts for us. And all of a sudden, he's been one of our most consistent pitchers for the most part. So you never know with pitching streamers. You never know.
One of my best recent pickups lately, going back a couple of weeks, Marcell Ozuna. Holy crap. Ozuna out of nowhere decided that he was going to turn it on like it was his prime season once again before all the dumb stuff he did a few years back. But Ozuna has been crazy good. But look, to John's point, though, and thank you, John, by the way, the final fantasy hot corner, we do appreciate all the hard work you put into the corner this year. Loved hearing your picks and loved having an excuse to talk about other teams and players across baseball besides the ones that are here in New York. But yeah, I actually dropped Andrew Abbott recently, who I traded for, but he had a stretch where he struggled hard. And it was just about time where it's like, I need a pitcher that's going to help things out, even if I just open the spot for another reliever or an opener or a streamer start. But Andrew Abbott had it go. And of course, after I dropped him, he goes and has a great start against the Cubs on Saturday. So yeah. Naturally. So anyway, thanks again, John. Make sure to give him a follow on his social media platforms on X, Twitter. That's at J Hertz with 2 Z's, 3 2's. And on Instagram, that's J Hertz 1 Z 3 2. So if you're confused, look at the bottom of our ticker. That's how you follow him right there. All right. And speaking of X and Twitter, Corey, what do we got going on Twitter or X?
Go ahead and follow us on X or Twitter. Again, the biggest name change since Giancarlo changed it from Mike. So X or Twitter, whatever you like to call it. I still call it Twitter. We're at 2,200 plus followers now and continuing to grow. So thank you all for your support. But follow us at ESB Podcast, myself at G Gory, Joe at JR Pugs, Rich at Rich J Rivera, and Tom at T Waspel. Again, on X or Twitter, whichever name you prefer. We'll go both ways.
Yes,
we're good.
We'll go both ways there. Love that. Now the Bronx is burning, and before I toss to the rest of you guys. Now listen, there is a lot happening in the Bronx right now that fans are getting excited for, and I understand. With Jason Dominguez and Austin Wells up, we're sporting the mustache tonight for Austin Wells. Got the bobblehead night at Somerset tomorrow. So I'm sporting the mustache for the faithful there. So forgive me for the look tonight. But very excited seeing what Wells and Dominguez did over the weekend in Houston, the Yankees sweeping the Astros. So that was awesome to see. But fans, can we slow our roll down just a little bit? Can we calm down? It's fine to get excited and have an eye towards 2024 and beyond. But for the fans that are thinking that the Yankees have a chance to make the playoffs in 2023, slow your roll.
Rich, I got kind of bad news to break to you. There's no one who thinks the Yankees are making the playoffs. People like this thing called Twitter engagement, and they know if they put tweets out that say, well, if the Yankees go 20-3 the rest of the way, you know what they get? They get a lot of comments and they get a lot of reposts, and people like that. No one thinks the Yankees are making the playoffs. Is there a path for them to? There's not, because there's no one who truly believes it. The people do this. They do this.
There's always somebody who thinks. There's always somebody who thinks.
Fine. There's a handful.
You have
of
Michael,
people,
but you have Kay on the broadcast today. You have Tierney on the broadcast
who has a radio show.
Thinking of a path that the Yankees have to the playoffs. Come on, do not mislead the fans thinking that they have a chance.
The Mets have a better chance than the Yankees
run to get there.
Listen, both teams technically have a chance because they play the teams ahead of them, and in theory could sweep those teams and could beat up on some other teams and make the playoffs. It's not going to happen, but to think you don't get stuck in the Twitter swamp and muck to think that people actually believe this. They do it for interactions. They do it for likes. They do it for comments. Kay's doing it because you know what? He has a radio show, and he wants people to listen to his radio show, and he wants people to call in, and he wants to get people excited, and he wants people to yell because that's good for ratings. That's all this is. So let's not get ourselves too worked up on the actual possibility of this. Let's just get excited about these kids are up. Dominguez in 3 and I guess a half games now. Looks like the real deal. Hitting 2 homers. Wells looked really good. The rest of the kids started to kind of show a little bit. Pereira had a big double. Peraza had a big double. So it's exciting. It's exciting to see them playing. It'd be nice that we could have done this earlier. I know some of that has to do with the service time stuff and the eligibility and years of control. That is a factor into this. But we're here. Let's get excited for the next month. And 2024, it's really kind of full steam ahead there.
I mean, the thing with the Yankees is we've seen Yankee fans in 3 stages in the past basically week and a half. We've seen them in complete misery. We've seen them happy the kids were getting brought up and just happy to view them. And now we got fans that have moved into the total delusion stage that they're actually going to make the playoffs with all these kids and make a run and all this stuff. Listen, and the Mets and the Yankees are in the exact same boat right now. The Yankees are 8 games out. The Mets are 7.5 games out. Both have games left against people ahead of them in the wild card chase, but neither team's got the horses in the stable to make a run. It's unglorified. The Mets have been here before. We've been here in 2014. We've been here before. several times. We were here in 2019 when Alonso came up. So the Mets fans are used to this. Yankee fans are never used to this. I mean, this is very rare territory.
There's a caveat to that, though. Listen, Yankees fans of our age, I know I'm technically a little older than you guys, remember the 90s. They remember the Yankees being the best dynasty that baseball has. We haven't seen a dynasty to that level since.
Yeah, but that was coming off of down years.
But since then, the Yankees haven't done a lot of winning, right? They won the World Series in 2009. They've been to one World Series since 2004. So if you're talking about what are the kids are talking on the streets of Twitter or X or Instagram or whatever, a lot of these kids haven't seen the Yankees win. Because if they're in their 20s, young 20s, if they didn't really watch baseball when they were 10, because baseball is not always the most exciting sport to a 10-year-old. For some kids it is, others it's not. They might not really remember that World Series, and they've never really known the Yankees to be like an actual juggernaut. They've known them to be the doormat to the Astros for the past half decade. And I think there are people getting excited over the kids, but I just don't think anyone truth serum believes that this team is making the playoffs, even though technically there is a road ahead of them.
Yeah, technically there's a road, but there's also technically a shot that I could win the Powerball. But there's a reason why I'm hosting this show right now in my Monroe, New Jersey condo instead of my oceanfront.
That's a lie, Corey. You'd be hosting this show on Powerball money too.
Yep. No, 100%. If we had won the Powerball, we would have our own channel on Sirius XM. So don't worry, we have another setup there. But again, reason why
the FCC would have Joe off within a week. They would say, no, we cannot have this lunatic on the airwaves.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, technically it's possible, but it's crazy too. Going back on the point you said, Tom, you look at the past now 2 decades, and the Mets and Yankees have had the same amount of pennants. I mean, obviously the Yankees won their World Series, the Mets did not, but it's crazy when you think about it that way. Because if you want to talk about purely just getting to the World Series, winning your pennant in your respective league, Mets and Yankees have been exactly the same in the last 2 decades. Obviously, the Yankees have had a lot more success and haven't been under 500 the past 2 decades. But at the end of the day, it ultimately comes down to winning championships. And that's where both teams have really struggled more as of late, more so the Mets, since that's been since 86. But we'll see what happens. And are they going to make the playoffs? No. Are the Mets going to make the playoffs? No. The best thing you could ask for right now, make it fun. Win more games than you lose. Let the kids hit well. Let the kids hit well in big spots. And see what you got going into next year. It's same exact story we said earlier about the Mets. I'm bringing up Mauricio, looking at all 4 kids. Same exact story right now for the Yankees side. Just see what happens and have fun with it.
My thing with the Yankees is, and I'll ask you guys this question. The Yankees clearly have done a great job kind of marketing these kids for the end of the season, you know, by batting Dominguez in the 3-hole and making sure that these kids are first and foremost. But could that also be to the detriment? I mean, especially Dominguez, it seems like Pereira looks like he's kind of flying under the radar. Wells is a catcher. You know, there's a minimal expectation for what catchers do anyway. But particularly with Dominguez, you know, we saw them kind of take care of Volpe for most of the year, bat him 9th, occasionally lead off when he was doing well. But having Dominguez 3rd in your lineup already, don't you think that's putting a little bit too much pressure and expectation on a kid that's 21 years old? A kid that's already been declared the next Mickey Mantle legally.
He can't. But honestly, Joe, I think my counter to that would be the Yankees have called up Jason Dominguez from Somerset to AAA, and within a week, he had put in numbers that he paralleled in all of July, where it was his best month in AA. In AAA, he was doing the same. And I almost wonder, did the Yankees want to capitalize on how hot he was hitting in AAA against pitchers who were former major league pitchers? We've talked about it many times before. You see a lot of veteran MLB pitchers in the AAA. Did they want to just capitalize on that hot bat and just keep that going into this weekend in Houston? That could be a reason why they batted him towards the middle to then the 3 spot. I do think it is kind of wild that even with a hot bat that they batting him third.
Yeah.
And hopefully it works out, and maybe that could be the future permanent spot for him. But I did wonder that too. Why already throw him into that spot in the lineup when you have veteran players that could still do it? Hell, you could even put Volpe in there, who's looked like a veteran next to these kids who been called up.
If the Yankees are really committing to playing the kids, and at that point, that's what? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. Like someone's gonna be hitting 4 or 5. I mean, Judge is hitting 2, DJ's leading off, and you have Stanton and Torres in there too. So
that's fair.
I don't know. Like I think I would imagine with him coming up, had to be a conversation that said, listen. Kind of similar to if you remember the conversation Boone had with Volpe in spring training that, hey, you have development to do, but we want to see it on the big league level. I imagine they told if the Yankees were in a pennant race right now or they're a division race, I don't think even if they brought him up, I don't think he'd be hitting 3. I think at that point they'd have him lower in the lineup. I imagine he's been kind of told, listen, this season is for all intents and purposes lost. We just want to see you develop. No pressure, not saying no pressure, but like the pressure of like, we need to win these games. If I go 0 for 4, I could cost us the playoffs. He doesn't have that on him. I think he's okay.
And Joe, to your Volpe point, the Yankees absolutely protected him throughout the season. I know we had conversations
for parts of the season, not for all of the season.
Is it time to send him down to AAA? They kept going with him, but he right, and that's exactly what I was getting to, Corey. In Somerset and in Scranton, he was the leadoff hitter for both the organizations. He came up, and yes, they stuck with LeMahieu for that first couple weeks. I think they even had Gleyber Torres, but then I think it was week 2, and Volpe was in the leadoff spot for a good week and a half. It did not work out there, and they took him out. So I think the Yankees aren't afraid to bat those players in where they feel comfortable that they did in the organizations the minor league organizations that they were before. So that could be the reason why. But to see the niggas between Judge and Stanton in the lineup already is insane.
It's nice. Like I said, just my concern with Dominguez in particular is just due to the fact that the expectations for this kid are at an all-time high. His nickname is the Martian. Mm-hmm. He was compared to Trout and Mickey Mantle when he was coming up. And I would think that the Yankees would have wanted to temper those expectations, not feed into them. I think by batting him 3, you can get to the point, especially if he gets off to a quick start here. You're going to feed into that expectation that this kid is the second coming. And now going into next year, you're like, oh, Dominguez is the 3 hitter. It's Judge and Dominguez. It's Judge and Dominguez. And now we go.
I say it again.
And listen, that's great. But, when you put that much pressure on a young kid, especially one as young as Dominguez, I would think that the Yankees would want to relieve some of that expectation, not feed into it. And it seems they're feeding into it. And to Dominguez's credit, the first week or so, he's accepted that. He's
took that bomb Verlander deep.
Right. But at the same time, that would be my main concern is like, I would rather see Torres batting 3 and Dominguez batting 5 or 6 and go from there. And if he hits his way into the third hole, so be it. But at the moment, like I said, I can see that expectation being a lot to bear for a kid like him.
Yep, it's going to be fun to watch over these next few weeks. To our members of the chat, how many home runs will Jason Dominguez hit by the end of 2023? Throw your numbers into either the chats of Twitter, X, YouTube, or Twitch. All righty, we're going to move forward with our game. Joe, what's happening over on YouTube?
So you can go to YouTube. We are now airing live there as well as Twitch and X. You can like, share, and subscribe for all your post-game recaps, not so much as lately because there's not been much to recap, and all the episodes from Empire State of Baseball, including some of our best moments, conversations, and arguments. So you can make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit that like button when you go there.
All righty, sir. Now it's time for Guess the Graph. I have the autograph today, gentlemen. So let's throw it up here on the screen. And there is our signed baseball. I will say, while I pull up a player profile here, any initial guesses there?
Chase Headley.
Before.
Thank you. Give me my point.
Thomas. You're
Dang.
Thomas, you're no fun.
Give me the.
Do you have this ball? Is that why?
I do.
Oh, come on, Rich! You got to make it.
Oh man,
that.
That's not my ball. That's not like Rich did not sneak into my house, take that picture, but that's a Chase Headley ball. I
mean, you got to miss.
I know it. I want that lead.
There. The C and the H were.
The C and the H were there, and you know
what? I didn't think that was a dead giveaway because after the C, it doesn't like. No, right. There's a 3 in there. The middle's kind of hieroglyphically a little. I don't know. I thought that was difficult.
Was he number 3 on the Padres?
I think he was number 7 on the Padres.
He was 13 on the Yankees?
No,
he was 12 on the Yankees. There was another third baseman that was that rocked that number for a little bit.
Third baseman of all time.
The 3 is what was throwing me off a little bit too, because I was saying to myself, well, maybe this wasn't a Yankee, but
yeah,
I'm not gonna
listen. I was gonna let you go through it, but you said any initial guesses. And I had one because I knew that was Chase Headley. Give me the points. Give me the first base crown as we head into the stretch run.
How about Clint Hurdle?
Suck it, Joe.
That was a layup for Tom. So
Tom 16, Joe 15. I'm at 12. Corey's at 7.
Layup, Joe. But I don't want to hear a layup. Last week for Trick of the Trade or whatever, you chose a non-New York trade. So I don't want to hear gamesmanship.
With a very prominent player in it. I mean,
one prominent player, and then
Kurt Schilling. Kurt Schilling.
And then
Kurt Schilling.
And then some schmuck who's shining shoes now. What are we doing?
Guys played 15 years in the major leagues. Jorge De La Rosa. I mean, come on.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to turn the difficulty meter up. Yankees are up 3-1 over the Tigers. Stanton with a 2-run home run, which I'm sure you could see the highlight on Instagram. You can follow the Yankees on Instagram at Yankees, but follow us at Empire State of Baseball, at Corey Favs, at JR Pugs, at Rich J. Rivera, and at
Yankees could be 7 back after today. They're talking.
Stop.
And follow Chase Headley at CH3.
Oh,
well, Chase Headley did not help me with the guess to graph, but maybe core curriculum will help out Corey Favs, who's in 4th, or myself, who's in 3rd. But that will be back here for our next episode. And speaking of our next episode, that will not be until September the 18th, which is a Monday. And by the way, that Monday is our new time slot as well. 7:00 p.m. starting Monday the 18th. And yes, we did skip a week. We are not going to be here next week. We got half the podcast won't be available. So we are skipping next week. We're taking our Labor Day next week. That's what we're doing.
So no episode. Tom and Joe show, but we didn't think the internet could handle it.
No episode during the 11th or 15th week next week. So we will be back September 18th, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And then for all you football fans out there that can watch Monday Night Football after, go for it. But we will be back for that new time slot starting on the 18th. All righty, let's wrap things up. Oh man, it's 8:57. Take your time, gentlemen. Damn. All right, Thomas, what do you got for our faithful? Any final words of wisdom here on this episode 60?
I would like to thank Chase Headley for having such a recognizable signature that I don't know how you guys couldn't figure out. That was Chase Headley. So thank you, Chase, in whatever you're doing at this point. Hopefully nothing horrible. Did you say horrible? I don't think so.
It is draft week, so I'm thankful for all the drafts I got to do. I think I got 3 remaining this week, which is always fun. A couple of us guys get together for our draft tomorrow. Corey himself will be there. And it's going to be a fun year in football. But right now, I'm thankful for the Mets right now winning 9-1. So that's also another thank you.
Yep, and I'll give a thank you while he's here in the chat. Joe, thank you for the weekend in the PA house. It was a very fun weekend, and James cooked a phenomenal barbecue dinner.
All right, and thanks to the boys for having a great Labor Day weekend and sick invite, by the way. Would have loved to have been there for it. But anyway, there's always next Labor Day weekend, right? So anyway, we're going to see you guys here in 2 weeks' time. Thank you so much. Thank you, John, for the final installment of the Fantasy Hot Corner. We appreciate all the work you did all season long. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Corey, for a great show tonight. Again, 2 weeks. We're not here next week. We'll see you on September the 18th. That's on Monday. Until then, enjoy the football coming up this weekend. It is football season. Enjoy that. Tom, enjoy that pumpkin spice latte and the weird summer weather 97 degrees tomorrow. All righty. Take care.